So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Dominic Broomfield McHugh and Sarah Kesterman.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? We've had quite an afternoon of what you could call tech challenges. So my brain is slightly befuddled by all of these things, but I can cope with the Showstopper bit, hopefully. So as Martin said, this is my first lecture of the year on this series about showstoppers. And as you will gather, because it does what it says on the tin, you can see on the slides on the screens at the side, a showstopper is something that is about stopping the show. Okay, we start from a low level of learning and assume you've never experienced things before, life out there. And the Oxford English Dictionary goes a step further, very helpfully, and says it's a performance which, or performer who, receives prolonged applause from the audience, one that stops the show. And the earliest example of this that the Oxford English Dictionary gives is from the Fort Worth Journal-Gazette on the 29th of September 1916. But because we charge you such exorbitant amounts here at Gresham College, we go the extra mile. So I have found an example from 1912, which is from the industry publication Billboard. And this is a quote from a review which says that this performer, Alice Walsh, proved a showstopper when she appeared in the spotlight and rendered Will Rossiter's song hit, "I'd Love to Live in Loveland with a Girl Like You." And for Sondheim fans, this title, as a sort of sidebar observation, is significant because, as it happens, this earliest example of showstopper in the press that I managed to find refers to Loveland, and the final sequence of Sondheim's musical Follies is called the Loveland sequence. So how's that for useless, spooky information? Now, one of the things that intrigued me about a lot of these early references to showstoppers in the press is that a lot of them were from what we would think of as quite lowbrow entertainment. So if you have seen this, you can see it's a review of a burlesque show. This is a very low form of entertainment that was popular in the late 19th, early 20th century. And one of the key facets of it was it involved female striptease. And when we consider this, then actually the loud whooping that we might do when we see something more demure, like My Fair Lady and The Rain in Spain and the audience erupts, actually that tradition seems to come from much lower forms of entertainment. And it gets worse because the other kind of group of shows that we find in the press are for minstrel shows. So blackface minstrelsy is the other kind of genre in American entertainment that we find a lot of references in the press to showstoppers. So before we find it in reference to musical theatre or Broadway, there are all these references to songs from minstrel shows. So it becomes a slightly creepy term. In the 20s, it's used all the time in the press in relation to vaudeville, which is a sort of variety show, something that's pretty much died out now. But a lot of the things that we see in the 20s, a lot of the references to showstoppers in the press are about vaudeville. And it's only as we go through to the end of the 20s that we find references in relation to showstoppers in operetta and eventually musical comedies. Now, I was absolutely desperate to find, or hoping to find, examples of people writing about what it felt like to experience a showstopper. The problem was, as in these forms of entertainment, the problem was that because it became in common parlance, then it wasn't necessary to kind of chart what it was all about. But I did find this wonderful article, which is my single favorite source that I found for this lecture, which is about the use of applause machines at the Republican National Convention in June 1936. This is a treat. They're called Political Showstoppers, and this is from Cleveland, Ohio. And it says, the Republican National Convention, soon to get underway here, will have applause machines. Under this system, applause high points can be calculated comparatively, and the impact of the oratorical explosions can be measured. Zeal of the cheering squads can also be recorded. With the new setup, there will be a scientific estimate of the convention's showstoppers. Don't tell Donald Trump this is available. And the excitement, the zeal that people in general felt about whether something was a showstopper got to a point whereby there were lots of letters to the press. For example, this letter from an audience member to the editor of Variety, who said, "Your vaudeville reviewer wasn't very careful in the recent review in Philadelphia during the Patricia Bowman date. They gave no mention whatever to pianist Irving Fields, who stopped the show in the performance I caught. I am a musician myself." That's them told. So you can see people are getting kind of interested in whether something is a showstopper or not. And in the 40s, it even got to the point whereby showstoppers would be a commodity that you could buy. So you start finding advertisements for people who could be hired to stop the show for you if you were a producer, which seems very useful indeed. And then as the 40s go on, we finally see references of showstoppers in higher forms of entertainment, ballet and opera. And I was most surprised to find a reference to parts of a Wagner opera, which famously are through composed, so you're really not supposed to stop halfway through and applaud. But there were showstoppers in this performance at the Met in 1942. We start finding it with musical comedies in the late 1930s. This is one of a number of examples of reviews from Rodgers and Hart musicals. And then by the 50s, finally the New York Times, which seems to have been rather reluctant to start using this term in its reviews, is suddenly going crazy in 1956 and referring to certain things as showstoppers, which takes us through to 1959, where a group of albums started being released, all of which referred to showstoppers in their titles. So Edie Gourmet sings Showstoppers, 1959. Carol Burnett remembers how they stopped the show, 1960. So that suggests it's something from the past that maybe it's not as good as it used to be, who knows. And then more albums that are called Showstopper. Even in 1965, an album recorded by the New York Philharmonic, right the way through to Liberace in 1979, which I've highlighted for the good reason that it includes Send in the Clowns. I think it's the first time that Send in the Clowns is used in an album called Showstoppers. So you can see that performance is an important part of this process, and therefore I have called upon a very distinguished friend to help me unpack this idea. And she is one of our great actors of the British stage and screen. She's appeared alongside almost anyone that you can think of, from Roger Daltrey to Sean Connery, Ian McKellen to Dame Maggie Smith. And in I won't say what year, a while ago, she appeared in a very famous landmark production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, directed by Peter Brook, which was commemorated in 2011 by Royal Mail, and she appeared on the first-class stamp. And as if all of that weren't enough, she's also been in several distinguished performances, productions of musicals, including appearing as Fräulein Schneider in Cabaret, for which she won her Olivier Award, which you can see in the middle on display at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Please welcome Sarah Kestelman. So Sarah, one of the things that we can see on the slide here, I realise you're probably the only person in the room that can't see anything because it's all very awkwardly arranged for you. But you're there with Topol at the top of the slide in Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh, so I am.
So you are, and you appeared in the 30th anniversary production of the show at the London Palladium in 1994, I think. And one of the reasons for highlighting this is that he sang in that show famously an authentic showstopper, which is If I Were a Rich Man. Can you say anything about the impact of that on the audience?
Well, I mean, of course, it's an astonishing show. Fiddler on the Roof, and it was the original production, so we had to follow the Bible. The recent productions, they can do what they want a little bit now with choreography and all of that, but this was from the original production. And Topol, by that time, had been playing it for many, many years. So he had, of course, an enormous audience, loving audience. So some of those people, I think, that came to see the shows that we did at the Palladium and around the country were people who'd seen the show before. And so there was, an immense expectation for, well, really all of the songs, but particularly If I Were a Rich Man. And it was all very cleverly staged as well, because it had a spotlight on it and everything. So, and he knew how to work a stage, there's no question about it. But it was, without a doubt, a showstopper. And it was very, 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 very exciting to witness.
We were chatting earlier about the process that performers go through when they perform a showstopper, and maybe it's intended to stop the show. And because I come from the world of music and not drama, I sort of assumed that it might be potentially a scary thing, that first of all, the performer has got to maybe give something extra to have this impact on the audience, and then the audience is applauding so much that it can get away from you. But you seem to have a different view.
I think that can happen. It definitely can happen. And sometimes the audience can get a little bit out of control, and it's difficult for the performers to bring it back on balance. And sometimes you can have a performer that enjoys it all so much that it goes on, for minutes go on to the show as the run goes on. But I think that it's a mixture really of nerves, being in a big show and having to deliver something night after night with the huge expectation of the audience. But also there is an element of power, I suppose, in that, and this is not just in a musical, it's in the theatre as well, that when you sense that the audience are here, people sitting here are sitting unnaturally close to each other. This is not the way we would sit at home, so packed together. And by being packed together, we have this sense of becoming, a body, a creature all of our own, and then we start to respond to each other's rhythms and responses to things. That's very exciting. And so when a performer is faced with that, it can be very enervating and exciting to push the piece just that much further along. And there might be a point where it gets so exciting that it does get that enormous showstopper round of applause. And then there may be a way but it might just be the subtlest thing that the performer has to do, maybe just a shift of a shoulder, for the audience to know that point has passed and that the show is going to go on. It's subtle.
You've been in theatre of practically every kind, non-musical, classical, more contemporary things. Do we have an equivalent to showstoppers in non-musical theatre?
Well, I suppose Shakespeare, to be or not to be, I suppose, would be a pretty simple example, wouldn't it? I'm afraid I can't think of another. I'm sure there are many people in the audience who could. I can't off the top of my head.
Do you think it is equivalent?
Not quite, really. All right, so let's talk very quickly about Peter Brook's A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was in 1970. And what he did was he introduced a little bit of music. He wanted the actors to sing some of the speeches. It didn't matter that the quality of it was great or not. That wasn't the point. The point that he felt was that music could give a different dimension, different dynamic to emotion. That by being able to extend a vowel, that you could generate something very, very different. And that, of course, is true, and that's what's so amazing about opera and, of course, musical theatre. Does that answer your question?
It answers my question. And finally, in your experience as a theatre goer, because you're always off seeing what your contemporaries and friends and colleagues are doing, is there a particular experience that you've had of someone stopping the show that stands out to you?
Well, do you mean in a musical?
Sorry, in a musical, yes. I default to musicals always in my brain as if nothing else exists.
No, because I wasn't sure whether we were going to talk about that. No. Well, Patti LuPone. Patti LuPone playing, doing Gypsy was, for me, absolutely extraordinary. extraordinary. I mean, of course, she did walk through the audience, so it was amazing. There she was, right, walking right past you, but it was an incredible experience. I think there are others too, but that was the one that most powerfully stays with me. And Glynis Johns. I saw A Little Night Music in New York, whatever the year was.
1973.
1973. Or 1974 then I think. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I saw it, and I'd never seen anything like it before. And in my memory, it was that it was sung through. Of course, it's not sung through, but that's what I thought was happening. It was so extraordinary, that whole opening sequence. And there she was, this extraordinary icon, Glynis Johns, that we'd seen so often on the screen. I'd never seen on the stage. So beautiful, so fragile, and yet that kind of steel somehow in her, that the kind of trooper of her. She couldn't have been more brilliantly cast. And then, not known for a singer, and not a great singer, but this extraordinarily evocative, touching, husky thing came out of her, and it was adorable and wonderful and show-stopping.
Marvellous. Well, that's the perfect segue to the person that we're here to talk about, which is Stephen Sondheim, who, of course, is the great writer of A Little Night Music, from which Send in the Clowns comes. And it's hardly worth summarising his career because it would take too long, and at the same time he's iconic. But we note that he made this impact in the 1950s by writing the lyrics for these two iconic musicals, West Side Story and Gypsy, and then subsequently changed the course of the musical theatre by writing both the music and the lyrics to various other shows, including Sweeney Todd, and was very awarded with it, winning the Oscar, the Pulitzer Prize, a Kennedy Center honor. He won every award on the planet, and quite right too. A Little Night Music is kind of interesting in that pantheon of his works because this one got pretty good reviews, whereas he had a slight history of people not always understanding his work when they first encountered it, as we know. But he's someone who came to be understood and cherished much more as the years went by, and some of his works, when they were revived, got more lauded than when they first appeared. So A Little Night Music is based on the Ingmar Bergman film Smiles of a Summer Night from 1955. And since I am sure there are people in the audience who've never seen A Little Night Music, I thought it was important to quickly communicate the essence of the plot, but really not all the details, so try not to judge me if you're from the Sondheim Society. But it's about an actress called Desiree and a lawyer called Frederick Eggerman, and they are former lovers years ago, and they have both moved on to other people. Desiree has a current lover, Carl Magnus, who is very stupid, and she has a daughter called Frederica, which might be a hint as to who her father was. Frederick is now married to Anne, who is 18 years old. They've been married for 11 months, and the marriage has not yet been consummated, which is a bit of a problem for poor Frederick, and I guess for Anne as well. And Frederick also has a son from his first marriage, Henrik, who is 20 years old. And so the general thrust of the plot is for everyone to change couples. And so instead of Frederick being married to Anne, we need Anne and Henrik to get together, leaving Frederick magically available to Desiree again. And Send in the Clowns comes well on into the second act of the show and is about this moment where Desiree expresses her desire to get back together again with Frederick. Oh my goodness, there are bullet points in the slide that didn't exist when I uploaded them. Oh well. Good. Like, what are these dots? Good. Let's unsay that. Okay, Sondheim was very unusual in that he was an enthusiastic teacher, which is not something we particularly associate with people necessarily that write musicals, especially for someone of his generation, where musicals were not seen as something that you might want to take into colleges and universities and sort of teach people about. But he was very communicative around his theories of the musical, and he thought there were 3 rules to writing a song for a musical. The first one is content dictates form. So basically he's saying what the song is trying to communicate dictates the form that the song takes. Number 2, less is more. Don't go on a lot. But he would add as a sidebar to this, not less is less. And so he would compare his mentor, Oscar Hammerstein's Oh, What a Beautiful Morning, which he thought was beautifully lean, to Climb Every Mountain, which he loathed and thought was very trite. So it's about less is more, not less is less. And finally, God is in the details. Well, we'll see lots of this in a minute. But let's stick with content dictates form and those 2 bullet points. I've been very lucky to have had the full support of Sondheim's estate in preparing this lecture. In fact, they have shared with me about 15 scans from his papers so that I could piece together the process of putting the song together. The song was written a couple of days before rehearsals finished, so they were ready to go to another city and put this thing on the stage in front of an audience, and he's still got to write Send in the Clowns. And originally, this song moment was going to be for Frederick, but they discovered during rehearsals that Glynis Johns was pretty good, as Sarah was saying, that she had this ability to communicate through song, even though she wasn't a singer in the traditional sense. And so they decide, instead of writing a song for Frederick, they're going to have a big moment for Desiree. And because it's quite delayed in the show, I think this is part of why it's particularly impactful. We've not heard her sing 3 solos before. She comes along at the end and reveals herself in this big solo. So we have these 3 sketches where Sondheim and Hal Prince, the director, have got together and sort of tried to work out what it is that's the content that's going to dictate the form. What is it we're trying to communicate here? And so they write these, or Sondheim rather, has written these lines that would never have been intended to be actually read out, but he's trying to get into the essence of the character. And so it has things like, we're having a parallel experience, she says to Frederick, and I can't convince you. Because basically she said, leave Anne and come and be with me forever. But he's committed to his marriage, so it's not going very well in this moment. And so he's finding other ways of saying this. I thought I wanted to rescue you and rescue myself. But how can you rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued? So he's trying to get into the essence of what's being said. Then we have a second version of it, and he goes in a slightly different direction. Frederick is going to say to Desiree, have you ever moved somewhere, gone somewhere, done something, not knowing why? So he's sort of saying, I've come to see you to have a conversation in your bedroom, but I don't know why. This is different from where the scene eventually goes, where Desiree has explicitly invited him to come and speak to her. And Desiree responds in this way. Oh, have you got the mic? Sorry, Sarah. See, it's very complicated.
Good point.
The tech.
I'll tell you why you're here. You have an awkward feeling because you don't know. You're trapped. You think you've made your bed and you have to lie in it. The hardest human thing to do is to sever a relationship. Also, you like to suffer, which we all have a capacity to do. Also, you've decided that the only way to be young is to be with someone who is. You're here because you should be, because it's right. You're afraid of your own age. You think that halfway through life is the end. At 50, one is shocked that one is still operating, so one feels young. 50 is less than halfway. You're here because your waistline's going and you don't have to worry about it with me. I knew all this the minute I saw you at the theatre.
So there you go. So what she's saying here is quite direct at this point, and it doesn't really give rise to Send in the Clowns kind of emotion because it's a bit too blunt. So then they have another go at what they're going to say, and this version makes reference to opening doors, which becomes an important image in Send in the Clowns. And here is this version in full.
It was a good thing that we didn't get married back then. I was too busy on other things. And you used to be a strong and willful man. Now there's nothing competitive. There is with Anne. There's a time to stop opening doors. Doesn't mean it's over. Maybe it means you found what you want. As you get older, sex changes. It may get less exciting, but more satisfying, involving, because you're not making love to impress. It becomes an act of commitment. We're giving each other something, not proving. One gets such strange ideas as one gets older. I mean, things like consideration, tenderness, caution, and yes, love.
So you can see they really are fiddling around with what they're trying to say before they even start writing a song. And I'm aware there will be people in the room that aren't familiar with the song, so we're going to perform it for you now. And I thought I would summarize the dialogue that goes into it in the final version. So in the final version, oh, this has now died, good. My clicker no longer clicks. Oh, ooh, it is not moving at all. Okay, well, it's getting more interesting now. Okay, so Desiree says, shall I tell you why I really invited you here? When we met again and made love, I thought, maybe here it is at last, a chance to turn back, to find some sort of coherent existence after so many years of muddle. So they've been lovers in the past, and she wants to get back together again and feels they've made a mistake in not staying together. And Frederick responds, well, when my eyes are open and I look at you, I see a woman that I've loved for a long time who entranced me all over again when I came to her rooms. The woman who could rescue me, of course. But when my eyes are not open, which is most of the time, all I see is a girl in a pink dress, teasing a canary, running through a sunlit garden to hug me at the gate as if I'd come home from Timbuktu instead of the municipal courthouse 3 blocks away. And so he's saying no. And the only way that she can respond, therefore, is in song, because it's the music that's going to lift the emotion of the situation. I will now have a crisis while I find the music. Okay. There we go. Are you happy with that?
I think so. Hello, hello, hello. Yes, that's right.
Great.
Isn't it rich? Are we a pair? Me here at last on the ground, you in midair. Send in the clowns. Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move. Where are the clowns? Send in the clowns. Just when I'd stopped opening doors, finally knowing the one that I wanted was yours, making my entrance again with my usual flair, sure of my lines, no one is there. Don't you love farce? My fault, I fear. I thought that you'd want what I want. Sorry, my dear. Now where are the clowns? Quick, send in the clowns. Don't worry, they're here. Isn't it rich? Isn't it queer? Losing my timing this late in my career. And where are the clowns? There ought to be clowns. Well, maybe next year.
Not being an actor, I don't have those abilities to make you stop applauding, unfortunately. So one of the features of this song musically, I'm going to briefly deal with how the music has been generated for the song, is that much of this musical consists of songs in triple meter, which basically means that each bar of music is divisible by 3. So it might be in 3/4 time, or 6/4 time, or some multiple of 3. And the reason for doing this is that 3/4 time has connotations of the waltz, and therefore dancing couples and also changing partners. So it's a sort of unifying conceptual feature, going back to the idea of content dictates form. But at the same time, the rule of 3 sort of communicates the idea of a love triangle, because there's 3 beats in a bar. So he's kind of managing to do 2 things at the same time, which is very clever. Something that a lot of scholars have identified and which Sondheim talked about a lot is that he was inspired for this song by the music of Rachmaninoff. And the piece that is most given as a sort of source of inspiration is his Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, the 18th Variation. And he talked about it, for example, in this interview, he said that Sending the Clowns is a rhapsody. That's a Rachmaninoff piano prelude, and has the kind of wandering liquid quality that Rachmaninoff has. It's a deliberate imitation. And in the most important book on Sondheim, which is Mark Horowitz's a very thick volume of interviews with Sondheim, going through every page of his manuscripts with Sondheim, talking about what he intended, Sondheim explains in a bit more detail. He says, it's the harmonic language of Rachmaninoff I was using. These were not pastiches, this was theft. Which is quite different. And at any rate, I remember it started with short lyric phrases. Mark, the interviewer, says, was it theft just to give it a sense of time period? And he said, no, it just came. I started to fiddle at the piano and I thought, oh, I know what this is. It's Rachmaninoff. Well, what the hell? In my opinion, the greatest tune ever written is the 18th Variation of the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, which we can see here. So for those of you that don't know it, I will play a very short amount of it now so that you can get the idea. Here we go. This could go very wrong because I was going to practice earlier and then didn't. Never mind. Sound familiar? Yes. And there are 2 things that that Sondheim draws on here. One is the triplets in the bass line, so this kind of stuff, which is giving the liquid quality. Because if you're going to have a singer who's an actress who can't sing a long line, you have to provide the line in another voice of the music. So in this case, the bass line. And this also gives him one of his favorite things, which is less is more. So we're only hearing these triplets, but it's doing a lot of work. And then the other one is the fragmented melody. So if Sending the Clowns only has this, then Rachmaninoff is similarly giving us. So there's not a great deal going on there. And if I can find the thing in the right, here we go. I will attempt to demonstrate how this might work side by side. Okay, so. See, I could keep this going all night. It's very peculiar. An impromptu showstopper. Very good. I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, he's not disguising the fact that he's stolen this music. Now, looking through the sketches that were sent to me of the song, he started off with this very strange page of 3 very strange scraps of music, which I'm not even going to bother playing for you because they seem to bear very little resemblance to Send in the Clowns, other than kind of the rule of 3 is in there, and there maybe is the odd chord, but really, I don't see Send in the Clowns in there. But the main music sketches consist of this single page of 9 kind of cells of music, which is a very strange way to write a popular song, because having looked at Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, Rodgers and Hammerstein, everybody famous before, they would normally either write the words, come up with a melody, and then harmonize it, or else they would write a tune based on a title, and then the lyricist would add words to it. But Sondheim is trying to find ways to musically characterize this moment, and he just does it through these little bits of music. So if we take the first one, well, okay, I now lost the bright page. This is my classic moment. I also had it in my Christmas lecture. Okay. Oh no, we're here. It's staring in the face. Here we go. So number 1 goes like this. So it's not very Send in the Clowns, except it's kind of got this triplet thing going on. So that's number 1. Number 2 goes like this. So this kind of stuff is a bit Send in the Clowns. And then number 3, intriguingly, goes like this. So we finally have Isn't It Rich, which is the opening of Send in the Clowns. And so he develops further ideas from there. Number 4 has this sort of accompaniment figure. Number 5, he's trying to find somewhere a bit more interesting to go in the middle of it so that it doesn't all go like this for 5 minutes. So number 5 is going... And so he's looking for something more interesting. And number 6 goes... And then number 7, he thinks, is it too slow? So then he goes for faster notes. But it's too vigorous for the emotion of the moment. So he retreats from that and goes back to... And then number 9. So he has this intriguing mind whereby that's sort of enough for him to develop this piece of music. But the bit that he spent a bit more time writing out fully was what we'd call the bridge passage, so the middle bit that gets a bit more emotional. There are 2 bits to this on this page, so this is the last page of music, don't worry. And this is the bit that goes just when I stopped opening doors, and he almost gets it right the first time, but not quite. Here we go. Yes. So it goes... There's a few rubbings out, but it's basically the song. And then he loses his way. And so it kind of comes a series of question marks. So then he goes back to the middle of that, where it's gone wrong, because he senses that it's wrong. And suddenly we get... So he kind of knows when he's got it right. And this is how he assembled the whole song. Except there's still no words, remember, because I've stuck these words on there. So then he has to sketch out the lyrics of the song. And the first page of lyric sketches are very haphazard. There's 1 or 2 familiar ideas here, like, I thought that you'd want what I want. But basically, this is very sketchy. The second page has over 90 separate ideas for the lyric on this one page, which shows what a fertile mind he had. And if you don't believe me, I counted them for you. There's the first 54, and there's the remaining ones. And there's every idea under the sun in that. So the whole thing is a bit like putting together a jigsaw Except you have to also invent the pieces, remembering that God is in the details. So he really does seem to stick to his own rules, especially in his great songs. So we're going to very quickly demonstrate a couple of fragments of this as if he hadn't improved the lyric. You look worried.
No.
No? Okay, so this is the first alternative version.
Isn't it fun? Are we a pair? Me with decisions, you with despair. Bravo, the clowns.
So it's not absolutely dreadful, but it doesn't quite hang together. And then we assembled another fantasy bit. So here's another bit.
Lord, what a farce. What does it prove? One who just flitters, one who can't move. Aren't we clowns? Clap for the clowns.
I think not so much with Clap for the Clowns, but you can see it's a sort of a tricky business to get this right. Incidentally, you might be wondering, why is it called Send in the Clowns? Because it's a slightly bizarre song title. Well, Desiree is an actress, so her song is full of theatrical imagery, like making my entrance again, sure of my lines, losing my timing. And because she's realized what she really wants, which is Frederick, she's revealing her true self for the first time, but falls back on these theatrical sort of ideas. And this is framed through the title, which refers to the practice of sending in the clowns in a circus when something is going wrong. And she's saying there's no need to bother sending on the clowns because we are the fools. So it's quite a powerful idea, but it did take him a while to take this sort of clown's word and do something useful with it. We get bravo the clowns, aren't we the clowns, bring on the clowns. Send on the clowns exists in various of these sketches. And then it's only a long way on that we finally get sent in the clowns, which seem to make all the difference. They also had to hone the ideas for the beginning in a lot of detail. So here we can see the lyric is almost there, but instead of isn't it bliss at the beginning, he crosses out the bliss and makes it rich, which is a much stronger word for the start. And he messes around with this line because he needs another syllable in the line musically. So he wonders where to put the word here. Should it be me here at last on the ground or me at last here on the ground? Playing around with it. There are many rhyming words on the right-hand side for ground, around, sound, she's bound, found, merry-go-round, profound. Sondheim is very keen on his rhyming dictionaries. And then finally we get this version which is fully worked out and which is fully in his handwriting. And this is in E major, which you may not care about whatsoever. But as I was getting the Paganini variations off the shelf yesterday, it made me think that the second movement of Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto is also in E major, and it has this going on. Which I think has that sort of Send in the Clowns feel as well. So there really is no doubt that he drew from Rachmaninoff in this. Okay, so you've written the song and you've put it in front of the public. It's time to look at the reception of the song. So here we can see Glynis Johns, who performed it on Broadway, as Sarah described earlier. She's best remembered nowadays. She actually died this year, aged 100. Remarkable. She was one of the very last figures of the golden age of Hollywood. She's best remembered for playing Mrs. Banks in Mary Poppins nowadays, but she mainly played quite serious and interesting characters on film. It's a bit of a shame that that's her main legacy. So Send in the Clowns is a useful antidote to that. And when I looked through the reviews of A Little Night Music over the months, it did start with praise for her, and it said that she brings the show to life, and that Send in the Clowns gave it a lift. But actually, as the months went by and there were more reviews, people are talking more interestingly about her performance. So in April, the original cast album was released, so they recorded it. And in the New York Times, it says that it's sung with haunting effect by Glynis Johns in her sensuously musical croak, which is sort of getting into the fact that even if the sounds she's making are not beautiful, they are very moving. This review is also interesting because it says that Sondheim himself is a summation and an elevation of all the lyric writing that has gone before him, which I thought was interesting. In Newsweek, so later in April, it describes it as a moving, bittersweet song which she delivers in the classic diseuse tradition of Mabel Mercer and Edith Piaf. So it recognizes this sort of French cabaret type of tradition in her singing. This advertisement for the album, amongst new albums of April 1973, describes Send in the Clowns as the best cut, which is very striking because everyone else on the album pretty much was a singer, and here is the actress giving the best cut. And she was interviewed briefly by The Hollywood Reporter in July, and she talks about how her favorite song is Send in the Clowns, which is difficult to do because you walk a fine line in making it work. So there's something about her spending all this time and honing it and learning how to do it as the months went by. And then more reviews come in, and the descriptions of her performance are more interesting. So the Washington Post says that her singing of the song isn't singing at all. It's a thrillingly heartbreaking whisper, a classic moment. The New Statesman says she does a hauntingly broken voice rendering. The Observer describes her frayed, affecting singing of Send in the Clowns, which could hardly be imagined by anyone who has not heard the song in context. So we get back to content dictates form. And then on tour, she was replaced by Jean Simmons, another great actress from the golden age of Hollywood. And again, even in someone else's hands, the song is described as stunning and the jewel of Sondheim's score. Indeed, The Guardian said that her performance makes you wonder how 4 simple words, like Send in the Clowns, can be so curiously affecting. Well, Elizabeth Taylor had the answer to that in 1977, when the film version was released, and the producer rather optimistically wrote just underneath the photographs there, Send in the clowns, send in the crowds. Well, no one came, and it was a flop. The last thing I'm going to talk about is how this song became a standard. So we've looked at the idea of it stopping the show and of showstoppers having this effect in theatrical context. A standard is something slightly different, although a song can be both things, and this one is. So back to the Oxford English Dictionary, it describes it as something, especially a tune or song, of established and long-lasting popularity. And so we get Frank Sinatra recording it on his comeback album. We get Bobby Short doing it in 1974, and it's described as poignant. We get Judy Collins significantly recording it in July 1975, and this was the recording that led to the song being named Song of the Year at the Grammys in 1976. So it sort of got away from Sondheim, because he wrote just a song for a dramatic moment, and he didn't understand how it had happened. I found this interview from the stage, where the interviewer said, I find it incredible that of all the songs you've written, Send in the Clowns has become so popular. And he said, it baffles me too. I've written a lot of easy tunes, but no one likes to record my stuff. And it's significant this happened 2 years after the show opened, but I don't think that a song like Hello Dolly Say, which is by Jerry Herman, would have been a hit if Louis Armstrong hadn't recorded it. Hits are flukes, he says. And when someone makes a recording, it captures the imagination of the record-buying public and then becomes a hit. So it's become a hit song. And to end, we're going to visit one other version of the song that Sondheim revisited once it had become a standard to solve a challenge in essentially cabaret situations, which is that in context, in the middle of the song, Frederick speaks to Desiree, leaves the room, and then Desiree finishes the song. Barbra Streisand in the 1980s wanted to record the song. She loved the middle section of the song musically, and she didn't want to have talking in the middle. So she went to Sondheim and said, please can you write some new words for it? So to end, these are those words. Sorry, should I have warned you a bit more there? Okay. I'm just reminding myself how this works. It's a bit complicated. Good, okay.
Don't you love us? My fault, I fear. I thought that you'd want what I want. Sorry, my dear. But where are the clowns? There ought to be clowns. Quick, send in the clowns. What a surprise. Who could foresee I'd come to feel about you what you felt about me? Why only now, when I see that you've drifted away? What a surprise. What a cliché. Isn't it rich? Isn't it queer? Losing my timing this late in my career. And where are the clowns? Quick, send in the clowns. Don't bother, they're here.